Hello everyone and welcome to episode 16 of the Blues News podcast. I'm here with Luke from the Luke Walsh football podcast, a Halifax fan ahead of Saturday's fixture. Firstly, Luke, how are you?
Yeah, I'm good, thank you. I'm looking forward to Saturday.
Yep.
One quite good with the form at the moment, back-to-back wins. So, yeah, it always seems to be an interesting game v Southend. Don't think we've actually lost to you at the Share yet, but we've only won one, and I think we've drawn 2 against you guys. So,
yeah,
hopefully we can get another win.
Talk about the head-to-head form in a bit because it is quite interesting. But yeah, obviously I'm really excited to have you on, and a lot of my viewers will probably be quite interested to have you on as well because recently we'll talk about it a bit later. But you have actually had Justin Rees on your podcast, so just briefly, how was that?
Oh, it was excellent, to be honest. He's so laid back. I think if I was a Southend fan, I'd be buzzing with what's going to happen because, he seemed very ambitious. And what I particularly did like about him, that what he was said and what he said off air as well to me was he wanted it to be perfect for the fans. He wanted him to come across well to the fans. And I think for an owner like that to, want to be seen, in a good light by the fans just shows the sort of person that he is. And I think if you're a Southend fan, I'd be respecting that quite a lot, to be honest.
Definitely, and you can see I'll leave the link to your podcast below.
Yeah.
But even in that podcast, you could see with how he was talking about the other members of the consortium, he does not want to take all the credit, which is really
exactly.
well. And on Saturday against Forest Green, it was like he was in the crowd, and I believe it was a Woking game as well. So he's always in the crowd, and he never sort of shies away from being in with the fans, which is very different to Ron Martin and how he used to be. So
yeah, I did actually get someone when it was all kicking off, a Southend fan actually gave me Ron Martin's number because I think it was like this time last year I made like a mini documentary on the issues at Southend. So I got Ron Martin's number, not expecting anything. I tried messaging him anyway, and I didn't get a response, but I didn't really expect one, to be honest.
No, I don't think he's the most friendly of guys. No. To be honest, he would not come on a podcast like that.
Yeah.
So if we move on to talking a bit about Halifax, and we'll come back to talking about your podcast a little bit later. So starting off with Halifax, so we're 20 games in now. How do you think Halifax have done in the first 20?
I think it's been quite a strong start overall, to be honest. More of the same from previous years, which may look, when you actually look as a Halifax fan, like it's been an average start, which it has over the last couple of years because every season we're always in and around the playoffs. But I think overall we're significantly overachieving. You look at our budget, I think nowadays you'd have to say even the crowds that we get now compared to other clubs and what we used to get, you have to say that we're significantly overachieving. We've probably got one of the bottom 6 or 7 budgets in the league overall, and I'm not over-exaggerating when I say that. So for us to be on just outside of the playoffs at the moment with games in hand, to be able to get into those playoffs, for me overall, I think it's been a very strong start, to be honest, to the season. Of course, there's areas where I think we need to improve on, but I think every club, to be honest, at the moment, will be looking at areas to improve. So yeah, I'm pretty happy with the start.
I'm not sure how this has changed from last night, but I believe Halifax is still in 7th or at least around there, just outside the playoffs or just inside.
They've dropped down to 8th because of last night. But we've got 2 games in hand on Altrincham and I think 1 on Rochdale as well.
And obviously, at the time of filming, you got Forest Green tonight. So, obviously a bit of a trickier game, but you could pick up points there. So, for me and probably quite a few others, Halifax are one of the sort of teams that you don't write off in a sense, but you never really put right at the top, but then they always seem to creep in and around those sort of playoff places. So in your opinion, do you think they are exceeding expectations this season?
Yeah, 100%. I think, to be honest, I say that. I think, when you actually look at the budget, but I think as a fan, I expected us to be where we are now because we always tend to do well. I could never see us under Millington pushing on, to be where York and your Forest Greens are. I don't think we've got the quality in the squad. Maybe I'm not doing the squad justice there, but consistently I've got the quality in the squad week in, week out to be able to push for actually winning the title or at least getting top 3 for me overall. But I think it's where I expected us to be, but I think we are overall exceeding expectations because of just the budget that we've got and some of the big clubs around us. Like, it's no disrespect to you guys because, like I said, I think it's a positive future ahead, and I kind of, in a way, expected you to maybe not have a brilliant season this year because obviously Cardwell's left, small squad still, and there's a lot of changes there as well. But you look at a club like Southend, you look at Hartlepool's, and we're, you look at them compared to us and where we're in the league, and you have to say we're overachieving when you look at the size of those 2 clubs.
Definitely. Well, we just mentioned it, but at the time of recording, obviously, you do kick off in about just under 2 hours, or just about 2 hours. So how do you think you're going to do tonight against Forest Green?
Honestly, I'm more confident for this game than I am against Southend on Saturday, because we always seem to do well against the better teams in the division because of the way we play. I don't know if any Southend fans watched that York game or saw the highlights, but against York, we should have won that game, in my opinion. We had the chances to win it. We should have gone 2-3-0 up. You even have to look at like defeating Barnet at the start of the season. And you have to look at previous years. Chesterfield we beat last season. Bromley we also beat. Two sides who went to get promotion, and then Wrexham we've beaten in the past as well when they went on to win the league as well. So for me overall, we seem to do better against the better sides. It's the sides that are down there, that are quite defensively solid that we seem to struggle against, particularly at home.
Yeah, it definitely seems like that. The Halifax one of those teams that sort of do better against the bigger clubs. And, I would like to normally consider Southend a bigger club, but our form this season, I'm not sure that'll massively play a factor in the game. But one thing that I did want to talk about just quickly is with Halifax sort of looking at about a year ago, obviously you did win the FA trophy in 2023. So what was that like?
Well, thing is, we've actually won it twice. We won it in 2016, but I wasn't that into football at that point. I'll be honest, at the time I was fantasizing over like Man United and all the best teams in England. So I didn't particularly fell in love with Halifax at that point, so I missed out on that. So for me to go down to Wembley with me, my team that I support, it was brilliant, and it was a great occasion to actually win it. To be honest, once you're there, you're not that bothered about winning the competition. It's just the fact that you're seeing your own club at Wembley. But I have to say now, if I want to see Halifax at Wembley again, it's not in the FA Trophy, it's in that playoff final, to be honest. I'm not too fussed about the FA Trophy anymore because we've won it twice.
Definitely. Well, I think for Southend, I'll just take any silverware. It's been a little while since we've seen any of that, especially a trip to Wembley. It's been quite a few years now. And like you, I weren't really into football like I am now back then. Yeah, obviously, I went last year just as a neutral fan to the sort of double game at Wembley, which was Wakering and Romford and Solihull and Gateshead. And it was a brilliant day out. And I just thought, like, you look at sort of the crowds that they were getting Solihull and Gateshead, and even Solihull had God knows how many there. And it's like Southend. I mean, how many would we bring to that?
Yeah, exactly. It's not far. It's not too far, and you're well supported as well. So it's like us. We took we took 10,000, which was similar to the previous time. But you think of Southend, where it's local, they'd probably take double that, 20,000. I'd have thought there potentially.
Well, before we move into just talking a bit about the game as a whole, a couple of things I do want to talk about. Obviously, you are a National League football podcast, which we'll obviously talk about as well. But one thing that I do want to sort of bring up and just hear your thoughts on is obviously we've seen the new edition of the non-league trophy, which is definitely controversial. But what are your thoughts on it?
Probably the same as everyone else's. I'm not a big fan of it. I think it's pointless. I don't, for National League clubs, I say that. You look at the crowds, and I think they suggest, how popular the competition is to National League fans. It's not something I've attended yet, and I don't plan on attending. And I just think it increases the chances of injuries to players. There's a number of factors that I can't even think of because there's that many off the top of my head. Also, you've got, for example, Halifax, as everyone will be aware, including Southend fans, our pitch isn't probably the best pitch in the National League. And to add an extra competition like that onto the pitch, it's just games that don't need to be played. There isn't particularly too much money to actually win either. And you're playing against kids, so there's nothing that attracts me to those sort of games. And I think it's the same across the board in the National League overall. I think if Southend pulled out of that, are they one of the few clubs that pulled out of it? Yeah,
one of the clubs that aren't playing in it, which I'm very happy about, because like a club like Southend, we've got such a small squad as it is. Like, really, our squad is. I mean, it doesn't really extend further than the bench, if I'm honest. So it's like. For us, that is an absolute killer playing that many games. And, on one half, you have the FA saying that they are scrapping replays to try and help clubs with that sort of thing. And then and then they go and introduce a couple that no one wants. So it's just very strange. But well, I guess replays as well. What are your thoughts on scrapping replays? Because I'm a little bit split on it, because on one hand, obviously with a club like Southend, if we with the Charlton game, for example, we would be playing at the Valley, and that is a massive money spinner for us. But it's on the other hand, on a sort of selfish fan level, there's not, when you go to a game and it's like a replay and then you lose the replay, it is a bit gutting. But it's sort of it's a tricky one, because when you play against bigger clubs, it plays into your favour. But if we were playing like 𝗟𝗨𝗞𝗘 or something and drew, and then we have to play against their place and then lose, that is like just extra games for no reason. So what are your sort of thoughts on the scrapping of replays?
Honestly, I'm against it. I wish they'd have kept replays overall. I think you're denying clubs opportunities and denying clubs extra cash that's significant, particularly to, for example, your smaller clubs. So, for example, if Wealdstone draw to Wycombe this weekend and end up losing an extra time, they're going to miss out on a trip to Wycombe, where there'd be a big crowd, a big pot of money, which would mean a lot to Wealdstone at the moment when you look at the current position, the park time. I think Maidenhead in the previous round actually were a victim of that as well, of not getting a replay. I think they lost in extra time, didn't they? To who they was against. So they would have got a replay. I think it was against Crawley. I'm against it. You look at some of the games over the years, Stockport v Bolton. You look at that replay. There's a number that I can't think of off the top of my head, but I think you look at, for example, Stockport v Bolton. You look at that. You look at other games as well in the past. Me overall, sides are missing out on money, and they're just kind of going towards the Premier League sides and the bigger clubs. And I think it shows that the Premier League or the FA had it's nothing to do with fixture congestion for National League clubs to benefit them, because they wouldn't have introduced the National League Cup if that was the case. Because I think you look at the FA Trophy, I'm not the biggest fan on it, but it's good to have that. That's our competition that's outside of the National League. You've got the FA Cup, which gives you an opportunity to play against the bigger clubs. No National League club's obviously going to end up winning that competition. And then you've got your league for actually trying to gain promotion. So to add another competition, I think it's quite pointless. And I don't know about you, but I don't even know where the final's going to get played yet. So
no, it just seems so sort of rushed and just put together like just any excuse.
It was just like it was last minute. We heard rumours, and then a week before or 2 weeks before the competition started, we all got a Twitter announcement saying that there's this new competition. So
it was ridiculous, and I was so happy that Southend obviously sat out of that, because it is ridiculous and it's just so pointless. As you explained, it's like we've got everything that we need. We don't need another competition to try and for me, all it is just helping out the bigger clubs to play their youth players against non-league. But if they want to do that, then they should be loaning players to non-league clubs, and which helps non-league clubs. This new competition doesn't help non-league clubs. It just means that we have to play more games. I just think it's ridiculous, and it does give those youngsters obviously experience. But as I said, if they want experience, they can loan them to our clubs and help us out.
It's good. It's good for the youngsters, because they're playing against physical footballers. The league's known to be quite a physical and demanding league. So it's good for the young players and the academy clubs, because they're playing against men football, and there's always that massive step, no matter how good of your football you are. Going from youth football to men's football is a massive jump at any level due to the physicality. But for National League clubs, it's a massive inconvenience. And I think what frustrates me is the amount of clubs that haven't boycotted that competition. And I've loved to have seen Halifax do that, a number of other clubs as well. I'm surprised Oldham haven't boycotted it, to be honest. And you look at the clubs that have, Southend for one, have got an owner who speaks to the fans quite publicly. You've got Matt Ugler at York. I've got my own opinions about him, but to be fair to him, he does come out and speak to the fans. It's the same kind of owners that are coming out and actually boycotting the competition. And it's the owners that actually speak to the fans and have the fans' interests at heart. So for me, it's frustrating, to be honest, that, the likes of Halifax are playing in this competition. And like I mentioned, I am very surprised Oldham are still in this competition, to be honest.
Yep. Well, we'll move on to talking a bit more about Halifax. Obviously, I've got you on to talk a bit about Halifax ahead of Saturday. So we've spoken a bit about Halifax's starts to the season, obviously their first 20 games. And, you said about how they're sort of overachieving and sort of going beyond people's expectations. But do you think they can carry it through for the rest of the season? And sort of where do you see Halifax sort of ending up at the end of the season?
Anywhere from 6th to 10th, I'm going to say. Honestly, I think there's 4 or 5 clubs for me who are inside the playoffs at the moment who I think are levels above the rest of the division at this time being, and that's probably going to be York, Forest Green, Barnet are out on their own, and then obviously Oldham. Those 4, and I'd probably say Gateshead as well. That might change, to be honest. But I think Rochdale, although they won the other night, I think they're a side that could slip out. You've also got Halifax. You've also got Altrincham, Solihull as well. You think of those clubs, and they're the clubs for me that I could see kind of chasing for the playoffs. I think as well, I look at Hartlepool, and they're a bit of a dark horse for me. Everyone's kind of written them off, but I still feel they've got a very good squad there with a lot of depth. So I could see them putting a late run together to get inside the playoffs in the new year.
Well, there was a shocking result last night with, probably the most shocking, definitely the most shocking result of the night. Obviously, York losing, I think it was 3-0 in the end to Altrincham, which is just ridiculous. And 𝗟𝗨𝗞𝗘 scoring a hat-trick. I think he got a hat-trick, or at least scored a lot. So what do you think about that? Do you see Altrincham sort of having a late charge?
I've written them off all season, and at the start of the season, I think I put them like 13th, 14th, something like that. Maybe it was a bit high. I can't remember off the top of my head, but I definitely didn't have them in like a playoff race. And all season, I've kept saying, look, they're not as good as what they were last year, and it's kind of proven overall. There's been times where I think they've shown that they're a good side. But I watched them last night, and I thought this is a very good Altrincham side that didn't rely on one particular player like maybe they did at times last year with Con Clark. They've got a number of players that can produce goals on their day. I think there's certain games where you look at Altrincham and you think that, they're not taking their chances. They probably need to bring in a few extra players going forward. But if anyone watched that game last night, 𝗟𝗨𝗞𝗘's, in my opinion, has the potential to be one of the best strikers in this division. I think he already is, but he just needs to be a little bit more consistent in individual matches, because last night he was unstoppable. And Altrincham to win 3-0, it wasn't a freak result at all. They probably could have won that 4 or 5-0, to be honest. York were very poor, and similar to how York played against us, I think we could have won 3-0, 4-0 that game with some of the chances that we had. But, we let them stay in the game. They stayed in the game against us, where Altrincham killed the game off before half-time. So, they're a good side. I don't really know what to make of them. I think they need to be a little bit more consistent. But I think the difference between them this season is they probably don't have a player like Con Clark to their disposal, but the whole squad as a whole can produce goals. So for me, I think they have to be considered as a side that could finish inside the playoffs.
I think with Halifax, it is one issue that I sort of have seen on an outside perspective, because, and I've seen you raise it on social media before, is obviously the attendances. And I think you've raised that before, but obviously Halifax, you have expressed, along with many fans, sort of issues and concerns surrounding the attendances. What sort of impact do you think, well, firstly, why do you think the attendances are so low compared to what they maybe were before? And also, what sort of impact do you think that has on the club?
When I say before, I say like I mean getting 2,500, 3,000, which we'll probably getting 2,000, 2,500. But I've always thought there's potential with this club. And when we were getting 2,000, we were like where Southend are now, mid-table in the National League. So I was thinking, if we can get towards the playoffs, the crowds will grow to 3,000, 3,500, which for me, I think the size of Halifax, I think is what we should be getting. In my opinion, when you look at Halifax as a town, and there's a lot of big clubs as well, but it's quite a big catchment area. But what I will say, why I think attendances are so poor, I think there's got to be a factor of the fans expect too much from the players. I think the football on show is probably not the prettiest, but it's effective. You're going to see wins, and that's something that we're showing this season. But I think you can't just blame the fans. I think you've also got to blame the fact that probably, and I think the club's limited, but you have to blame the club to a certain extent. There isn't much of a match day experience. For example, I spoke to Justin Rees, and all the ideas that he had about Southend, with catering, and all the other ideas. And I think of that, and it was such a breath of fresh air compared to what, our Halifax have, because you come into the Share as a home fan, you go in the turnstile and there's a bar, a very old bar, as I had, and one catering van. And if you're like a family, it's not a very family environment. There's nothing going on before kick-off. The share overall is quite run down. I think there's a lot of potential because it's such a big stadium.
Yeah.
But for me, there's not much going on. So most fans are going to stay in the town and then come last minute. So no one's going to be in early. And families, I just think, aren't going to be attracted. They never have initiatives on either. Any effective initiatives, I may add as well. For example, you've seen sides in the past do football for £5, half-season ticket passes. That's something that Halifax have never even entertained. They have a season ticket at the start of the season that's £367 for an adult in the north as well. And I think it was over £100 for myself as an under-17 at the time. So for me, overall, I look at that and you look at the prices and you look at Bradford City, you've got cheaper season tickets, and Huddersfield, and you think, if you're a family who are wanting to get involved in football, you're not going to go to Halifax because it's cheaper to see better quality of football. Whereas in the olden days, it always used to be cheaper to go see Halifax, and Halifax always used to be seen as quite friendly compared to the other clubs, because obviously there used to be an issue with, hooliganism. So everyone would go to Halifax because it was quite a friendly environment, whereas now it's quite... I think it's quite dull and stale off the field, to be honest, with Halifax at the moment.
It is a shame because I have seen yourself and quite a few other Halifax fans sort of raising concerns about it. And it's just, a shame that they don't have those sort of initiatives. And, as you said, with Justin Rees, I mean, some of the initiatives they're doing at Southend, just even little things like they had at the Charlton game, they introduced a new burger van, and then the next week it was to home fans as well. So little things like they've now got a better burger van, they've opened a new stand, things like that really get people in the door. And as you said, half-season cards also really get people in the door. So hopefully Halifax can hire attendances, but I'm sure with Southend coming up this weekend, maybe it'll be a bit higher than normal.
He always seems to bring a fair few, to be fair, which is another thing. I don't think the home, you'd like to think, we're playing Southend, a former Football League side, there'd be a few extra hundred there, but I don't think they will be, to be honest, at all, because there's just nothing that attracts. They should be, in my opinion, because of the football, but there's nothing that seems to attract the fans. And I think we've proven in the past that, when we want to, the fans will turn up. So that that there's fans there. It's how do you bring them in on a consistent basis, and that's the issue. And I think there's a lot of clubs as well. Barnet, I know, have their own issues with attendances as well. Southend fans will be well aware of that. And I think Barnet fans will say the same. They'll have loads of ideas. I think Barnet, honestly, off the field's better run than what we are. I think, we know we're secure. We know that bills and everything like that, we're never in any danger. So we have to be thankful for that. I know at the time when fans were complaining, everyone kept saying, well, you need to think about Southend situation. But the thing is, we lack ambition off the field, and at times on the field with players that we bring in. So for me, overall, fans aren't going to get attracted. And there's a list of things you could talk about where we could improve on that don't even cost any money either to do. So that's what's frustrating.
Well, I think with obviously Barnet's situation is like I think I've heard that their stadium, I've actually been there, so I don't know why I don't know this, but my geography is all over the place. But apparently they're quite a bit out of Barnet. Like they're
it's not in Barnet. It's nearer Wheelstone than it actually is Barnet. No, Wheelstone's nearer to Barnet than where Barnet play are. Yeah.
So it's like that issue you can see. And also, it's similarly with Barnet and Halifax, they're both sort of near quite big clubs. And I think when you're near those sort of big clubs like Halifax are, you've got to do something that's going to stand out, because you're not going to bring in people with football. Because if people want quality of football or style or anything like that, they're going to be going to the other clubs around you. But yeah, as you said, if the prices are the same and the matchday experience is worse, then it's a no-brainer that they're going to choose those clubs. So yeah, it's just a shame. But I think Southend are quite lucky in the fact that we don't have many clubs near us, really. I mean, we have Colchester, but I think who is going to want to go and watch Colchester?
You're not Colchester fans, are you, to be honest?
Exactly. I mean, their attendances are shocking. I think they get about 4,000, which is just embarrassing compared to us for an elite side. But yeah, nobody wants to go and watch Colchester. And you look at the other clubs around, it's like Chelmsford, Braintree. I mean, they're all quite small clubs, really. They're not going to have much of an impact on Southend's numbers, that's for sure. So, well, on the topic of Southend, obviously, we do want to talk about Halifax, National League, and your podcast, but it is a Southend podcast. We will talk a little bit about Southend, and I'm sure you'll be happy to talk a little bit about it. So, firstly, obviously, a lot of Southend fans have been relatively disappointed. I think it's fair to say with the Woking result last night, weren't really a good game at all. It's 0-0. Hammered it down with rain, so it just never helps. But obviously, it's not been a great start to the season from a Southend perspective. But as a sort of outsider and as a sort of Halifax fan, what do you think of Southend season so far?
I think I'd be lying if I said, it's been an okay start. I think you'd have to say overall it's been quite disappointing because you looked at where they finished last season and you think now that the ownership's all sorted, which it is mostly, you'd like to think that now they'd be able to push on. But I think it's not as easy as that. And I see Southend fans, you get a small section, and this is a small section, who are calling for the likes of 𝗪𝗪𝗞𝗘 to be let go. Thanks, saying he's done well to get us where we are now, but now we need to show some ambition and bring someone else. And I think that's quite amusing, to be honest, because of what he's done. Harry Cardwell's left. I think a centre half, didn't he leave as well at the start of the season? You lost 𝗪𝗪𝗞𝗘 as well last year. So you've lost a number of players. And yes, you've brought in players, but to be honest, it's going to take time, isn't it, Southend? I'd still expect you to be in a better position than what you are now. I'd have thought that maybe you'd be 10th, 11th. But for me, overall, I don't think it's been a horrendous start. You're not in the relegation zone. I don't think you're going to be in any danger of going down, to be honest. So for me, overall, it's been probably a little bit below average for you guys overall, but I still think you're a hard team to beat, and I think you'll probably get better as the season goes on. So I won't be too disappointed if I'm a Southend fan.
Yeah, I think it's interesting to hear sort of an outsider perspective on it, because as a Southend fan, you can get caught up in thinking. I think everyone thinks their club like, why are we not on the top of the table? Why are we not doing this?
Halifax won't be happy, but that's where we should be with our budget. Do you get what I mean? Everyone wants to kind of be higher than where they should be.
Yeah, it's just like. But I think we've just got to sort of accept that it is going to be a tough year on the field. We've lost, we've lost Harry Cardwell at top. We've lost Kensdale at the back. We've had a number of injuries. 𝗪𝗪𝗞𝗘, Ollie Coker, that's just to name two. And it's been really ropey. We had a transfer embargo until literally about a month, if that, before the start of the season. We couldn't bring anyone. If we hadn't had that transfer embargo and we got the deal done probably in about June or April, something like that, then it would be, we'd be in a much better position. And players like Ollie Pearce, he might be a Southend player now had we have got the deal done sooner. And a player like him can make all the difference in whether you are in Southend's position or higher. And I think York have seen that with their recruitment in the summer and what they were able to do, because they were in a much worse position than us at this time last year. But they managed to pull back, get some names through the door, and that's just not what we've been able to do. So, it's a tricky one. But you look at players like Macaulay Bonne, players like George Moncur. On paper, those are good signings, but they just seem a bit. It's a tricky one with those. What do you make of those sort of signings?
Moncur, I think, is a good player, and I think he's shown that time at Southend. But also, he's been out injured, I believe, before he came to Southend, so he wasn't fully fit or he wasn't getting in. So for me, overall, when you look at Moncur, I think he's certainly a good player. Of course, he's been out. I think prior to him coming to Southend, he was out injured, and he's probably not been the fittest player in the squad so far. But I think over time he'll get better. So I'm not too surprised with him. I think Macaulay Bonne, I'm a little disappointed with so far. I think on paper you look at that and you think that's quite a good signing. I think he was playing in League One last year. So for me, I think that's a little bit disappointing, but for me, overall, Moncur, I'm quite impressed with. I think if I was a Southend fan, I'd be looking to bring in another striker as well. But I think Bonne overall, I'm not too impressed with at Southend so far, to be honest.
No, I think it's fair to say. I mean, even with Moncur, he's a good signing, and to be honest, in his first sort of few games, in the first sort of month or two, you could really see that he has that quality. But he has fallen off a lot, and he's sort of fallen out of the starting 11. I think that's a lot to do with fitness, because only last month he actually failed a fitness test just before a game. So there's clearly an issue with the fitness, but there's no doubt, like, you could see his quality is there. With Bonne, it's a tricky one with Bonne, because as you said, on paper it should be a good signing, but he's just, he is about 27 or 28, so he should be in his sort of prime years now. But it just doesn't seem that way. And if you saw him play, you'd think he's sort of towards the end of his career rather than in prime. And it's like, it's just a tricky one with him. But I think at the start, fans were sort of getting on his back and like, come on, like, what is this signing?
I mean, there's a high expectation, isn't there? When a player comes from a lower league, there's always that demand where straight away they should be scoring prolific goals. For example, Paul Mullin came down, everyone said he should be scoring at least over 30 goals. And of course he delivered, but there's a lot of pressure there. And he's another one, you've got to think there's a reason why. Obviously, Southend financially a lot better now, but there's still a reason why they're not a Wrexham. So there's still a reason why these players are dropping down 2 divisions to play in the National League. And I think Southend's quite an impressive club to play at. You've got a big following, a lot of potential there. But still, to drop down 2 leagues, it says quite a lot, I think, about the players. And it's probably to do with them being injured or not being fully fit. And we both can agree, as I mentioned earlier, that the National League's a very demanding league. So when you're not fully fit in the National League, you're going to be out your depth no matter how good you are. And that's something that I think Moncur has been at times, and what Bonn, to be honest, particularly been. But like I said, I think Moncur will be okay. Bonn, we'll have to wait and see, to be honest.
We will have to wait and see. But I think from what I heard at Woking, it's sort of a mix of opinions in the crowd, because on one hand, it's like, he is actually, when he's playing, he's actually not playing too terribly. Like, he is getting stuck in. He does win a lot of headers. And it's like, you know, you can sort of see glimpses of why he was a League 1 and League 2 player. But it's just frustrating that he hasn't scored yet. He hasn't scored a single goal. And it's just, you know, on one hand, some fans are like, well, he's doing really well in the games. He's playing well. But on the other, it's like, I don't know which camp I'm in, really, because on the other hand, it's sort of, he hasn't scored. He is a striker, and we brought him in to score goals. And it's
Harry Cardwell won the most. If I remember, he won the most prolific. He scored goals, but he wasn't the most prolific. But he did quite a lot, didn't he? So,
I agree. To be honest, he looked not very good at all against us on Saturday with Forest Green. But yeah, it was weird with Harry Cardwell, and I think to an extent, people look back with a little bit of sort of nostalgia and sort of good memories rather than the truth. And whilst I do think Harry Cardwell was a great striker, I'm not saying he wasn't, but I think with Harry Cardwell, it's tricky because he did score goals, and he actually did get quite a lot of goals. I mean, more than we're scoring now, that's for sure. But and I'll do anything to have him back. But the amount of chances he used to get, it was a lot, and he did miss quite a few. It's like, you know, he should have scored that. But I think being at a club like Forest Green will develop him, and I think he will become a better player for being at a club like that, surrounded by their sort of quality, especially in attack. I mean, you look at players like Christian Doidge, brilliant players in attack. It's like being around those players will develop him, and he's still quite young. So, but yeah, with Bonnet is quite tricky, really. And it's annoying because John Still is fantastic with us, and you know, the signings that he's making with Southend are brilliant, and they are good signings, but it's just some of them aren't performing. But one player that I think is probably one of our best signings, if not our best, is Keenan 𝗪𝗪, and for some reason he is not starting and hasn't started for the last month or so. And I can't imagine it's down to fitness, because he's young, energetic. Whenever he plays, he's running about again. So, you know, I just don't understand why he doesn't play. And I've said it a lot of times now, but I really do think he is probably our best midfielder, or at least one of our best midfielders, just in terms of quality and what he sort of brings to the team. So, yeah, hopefully we see a bit more of him, and I'm hoping he starts on Saturday with 𝗪𝗪𝗪 now being suspended for that game. So
that's good for us.
Well, it is normally, but Cav's actually looked a bit off the pace recently. He had quite a bad injury at the start of the season. He's come back for a few games, and he's just not looked the same. I don't know if it's sort of a reluctance to get stuck in because he's scared of getting injured or what it is, but his passing has just not looked like himself, because as I'm sure you're aware, he's an amazing player, but he's just been quite off the pace. And I think I said it in the match report the other day, is that to be honest, this suspension might actually do him a world of good, just to have a little break after coming back so that he can just get his head back, because he's not been good enough lately, sadly, as much as I love Cav. But, well, what players of Southend sort of stick out to you in particular then?
I think obviously all the ones you've mentioned. 𝗟𝗪𝗪 does, but like I said, I don't watch week in, week out Southend, so I don't know he's currently playing, but I've always seen him as one of the better midfielders in the National League.
Yeah.
Obviously he won't be playing, but I'd say 𝗟𝗪𝗪, he's probably the other one. When I've seen, he seems to be quite exciting as well on the ball. He scored a fair few goals. I think he scored 4 goals, hasn't he, so far for you? Like 15 or 16 games. So, he looks like a good player. I think he's quite young as well. The top of my head, obviously Forson. I think he's a bit of a wing. He's midfielder. Can he play in the wing position as well? Kind of. Might have seen him there.
Sort of one of those players that just sort of when he plays, he can just sort of drift where he likes.
I'll be honest. I've only seen him one game, but I think it was that Rochdale game away when he actually won, and I thought he looked pretty impressive in that game. So he's another one who kind of stands out to me as well, and Jack Bridge as well. He's quite versatile. He's been quite well known at Southend, but I think the issue Southend have had is a lot of the spine of the teams kind of left. So 𝗪𝗪𝗪 left season before last, I believe he did. Then you ended up losing Kensdale in the summer. Cardwell's obviously left in the summer as well. So you kind of lost that spine of the team, which is going to have an effect on you as well. And that probably means that your Miley's and maybe other players in those positions are going to struggle as well because they haven't got the mates who they're used to playing around with them, have they? So
yeah, definitely.
So I'm asking one question. Alan Cosgrave, would you take him back at Southend now?
It's difficult because he sort of played for us about a year or two ago. He was good when he played, but I can't remember now. I don't think he played too much for us, but he was actually he was a good player. But I'm not sure if I'd take him back now. I'm not sure. It's a tricky one.
You'd have to be a bit desperate to take. I don't like calling out individuals, but you'd have to be a bit desperate to take him back. To be honest, like he's done well at Ebbsfleet so far when he's gone on loan there, but for us, he just looked out of his depth, and I was surprised that a club like Southend had him. To be honest,
well, to be honest, I thought he was quite good when he played for us, but obviously that was quite some time ago now. It was quite a few years, like probably about 2 years. So personally, I quite liked him, to be honest, but. Yeah, I can see now. Maybe not so much. I'm not sure if I'd take him back. But so if we move on to talking a little bit about the game itself. So with Halifax, what sort of players should we be looking out for on Saturday?
𝗟𝗪𝗪𝗛. I think Southend fans will be aware of him. Obviously, being at Yeovil, he's a very good player. He dribbles, and I'm not even over exaggerating. He dribbles like a player that I've never ever seen at National League level in the past. You see him, and you know he's going to beat his man every time, more or less. He's very, very fast as well. The issue with, and this is probably why he's playing at National League level, he's got no end product. He has at times, and he's shown glimpses that he can produce that. But he's not consistently got an end product. Same with his passing as well. There's times when he probably needs to release it and he doesn't. He's always looking down when he dribbles. So that's probably why you can't see the pass. Not if a case of actually purposely being greedy. He just probably can't see it. So he's obviously one. He'll probably scare the light out of all Southend fans, to be honest, when he's there. But he won't. Most of the time, he doesn't do anything with it. But he's certainly one to look out for if he plays well. Florent Hotty as well.
Yep.
He's a bit of a luxury player, but he's very good. An attacking midfielder. Scores some excellent goals. He's got that bit of quality that could probably play at a lot higher level. The issue with him is he's had his injury problems. He's not always been fully fit. He's probably a bit like Moncure, to be honest. Clearly has potential and has quality that can play at a lot higher level, but he don't do it on a consistent basis, to be honest. So, they'd probably be the two, I'd say, if I was to pick two.
Well, with Florent Hotty, I was going to talk about him a bit because he is obviously a Kosovan international, which I found quite interesting when I was researching for the podcast. It's like he's played quite a few games for them as well, I think. And I think is he still involved sort of in the team? Yeah,
I think he plays for under 21s now, I believe. He might have done. I don't know. I'm not sure if he actually played for the national squad. He might have done, to be honest. I'm not too sure.
I think it might have been.
He's a good player, to be fair. He just had his injury issues.
So, lastly, obviously, this is probably my favourite question, actually, whenever I do these sort of podcasts. So, with styles of play, I think is something that people don't really like going into this game. I like a lot of fans probably don't really know what Halifax's style of play is. Obviously, we know what Southend's is, but how do you think sort of Halifax's style of play? Firstly, what is it, and also how will it sort of match up with Southend on Saturday?
I don't know if Southend's like style of play's changed, but it's always been very similar to that under Kevin Mayer. We're quite a defensive side, I'd say, and then the wing backs, we rely on them pushing up. So, for example, Oliver Bora, who's naturally a winger, sometimes plays at wing back, and then they kind of turn into wingers. So we seem to like to get it out wide and then kind of cross in. So that's probably how we play. We're quite a defensive-minded side, very hard to break down. That's something I will say. And then we seem to catch sides on the break. So if we go 1-0 down, I think against Southend, we'd probably struggle. And we did last year. I know we got back in the game, but we always seem to struggle if we go 1-0 down. If we take the lead, that's probably when we can kind of show what we're capable of, because Southend would have to come out, and that's when we can kind of exploit you. So I think Southend are quite similar, aren't they? They're quite defensive-minded and play with the wing back. So for me overall, that's probably how we play. We're quite defensive-minded. Hard to break down, and then we try to catch sides on the break. Don't get me wrong, at times we can show we can keep the ball, but I think first and foremost, that's probably usually the way we play. So that's how I'd probably describe it.
Well, with Southend, it's quite interesting because usually we do play quite similar to that. We play like a 3-5-2, the wing back sort of pushing up and down the pitch. But recently, actually, literally in the Woking game, for probably the first time during Mayer's sort of reign, or at least one of the first times, he rarely switches formation, but he tried it against Woking, and we switched to a 4-3-3 because the game before it's Forest Green, when we switched to the 4-3-3, it works really well. And it did, if I'm honest, it didn't really look any different to how we play with a 3-5-2. It didn't really feel like a different team. And sometimes those little formation changes can change teams, and it feels like an entire new team. But just against Woking, it just didn't really feel like that. But it'll be interesting to see what he does with the team against Halifax. He's probably one of the most interesting sort of selection choices of the season. Does he stick with that 3-5-2? Does he keep going and trying the 4-3-3? There's a lot of questions to be asked there, and especially with the goalkeeper. Does he bring in 𝗟𝗪𝗓 again, or does he keep Colin? I actually think Colin was our best player against Woking, in my opinion. But it's difficult because I actually think the 4-3-3 works really well. It just didn't look great against Woking. But then again, I actually think we're probably the better team out of two sides, but it doesn't really say much. Woking aren't the best of sides.
I think overall, you look at, I'd say probably our manager's quite stubborn in where he keeps formation, but when he has actually changed it, which he did against York, when we're actually winning, that's when we had a detrimental effect on us. But honestly, I think the game's going to be, I think it's going to be a game of very few chances, to be honest, for both teams, if I'm going to be honest.
Well, one last thing that I'd like to talk about is earlier you said about obviously the sort of record that Southend have at the Shea, and that we haven't really won there in quite a while. But out of the last 5 meetings, Southend have won 3 and we've drawn 2. So, it's sort of like the odds are stacked in our favour in terms of our last 5 meetings. So do you consider Southend a bit of a bogey team in general, or do you not?
At Roots Hall, I do. Because all 3 of those losses were actually at Roots Hall. I know the first time we dropped down into your division, you had quite a poor year and you beat us at home. I remember that game. It was a 1-0 win to you guys. So Roots Hall, I always see that as a very difficult place to go. If you're playing a side at home, even with how you're doing so far this season, I always tend to either back Southend to win or to get a point. So, and that includes playing against, the better sides in the division as well. Because I don't know, I just naturally see it's quite a difficult place to go. At home, no, probably not, because we haven't lost at home. I look at this game and it's not the type of game where I'm too confident for, because like you've mentioned, Southend play quite a similar way. And we tend to do better against the sides that actually try come at us, because that's when we exploit them. And I don't think that's something Southend do. They're very hard to break down and quite industrial in a way. So that's why I'm not too confident going into this game. I don't think you'll turn up and batter us by any means, but I can't see many goals being in it, to be honest.
No, I'm not massively looking forward to the game. I think it'll probably be a relatively boring game, but we're coming towards sort of the end of the podcast. So do you want to sort of talk a bit about your podcast, obviously what you do? I'm sure a lot of fans are quite familiar with it, especially after the Justin Rees episode, but obviously that'll be in the link below as well. But do you want to just sort of talk a little bit about what you do?
Yeah, can do. So basically, I run a podcast on the National League. Well, it's a YouTube channel, however you want to call it. I go live every Thursday, previewing all the National League fixtures prior to every single game week with my co-host, who's a 𝗟𝗨𝗞𝗘 fan. We have
on the podcast before as well.
Yeah, he's a nice guy. I do a podcast with him every Thursday. There's a live chat. It's always live, so people can get involved. And then we also do like bonus episodes. So we do like interviews, as I've recently done, which will probably be relevant to you guys, as Finn's mentioned there. I did an interview with Justin Rees, and that's now available to everyone. So you can go check that out if you'd like, about Southend. I really enjoyed doing that interview. So he's a really down-to-earth guy. And we also do other interviews with other players, managers, chairmans. Mark White we've done in the past. Adam Summerton, when he was part of the National League, we've done interviews with him before. That's basically what we do. And then maybe one or two mini documentaries we've done before, one on Southend, Scunthorpe. Usually when a club's in crisis, to be honest, we seem to pull a documentary out of the bag, to be honest. But yeah, that's more or less my channel.
Yeah. Brilliant. Obviously, I'll leave that down below because it is a great podcast. And to be fair, probably one of the biggest sort of reasons why I started doing this, which I was saying to Luke the other day. So
I'll tell you what, though, just after doing this, you're very good at interviewing. I'll give you that. Because to be honest, I've been doing this for probably 3 or 4 years, and it's took me ages to just get confident with it, to be honest. So you're very good at it, to be fair. So
thank you very much, Luke. Well, actually, also the first ever the way I started my account, the first ever match report that I did, which has always been quite a big part of my account, doing match reports on the games I go to and stuff, was actually a 3-0 win at home to Halifax. So
was it? I remember that game. Was it last year, January? Yeah, I remember that game. It wasn't a good one.
Yep. That was the first. That was the first ever match report that I ever did. So there you go.
Yeah, 3-0 win. It was awful. I wouldn't want to do a match report on that game, to be honest. But as a Halifax fan.
Yeah, as a Southend fan, it's brilliant. I was like, now's the time to start. Get out of this. Well, I've really enjoyed having you on, Luke. Obviously, it's been in the making for quite a while. I've wanted to have you on for quite a while, and obviously with Halifax, we were like, we'll do it when we play you. So it's been great to have you on. Obviously, I'll leave all your links below, and I would suggest everyone check it out because your account's brilliant. So is there anything you want to say before I end it?
No, I'll just tell you, I reckon it'll be like 0-0 or 1-1, to be honest. But no, thanks for having me on once again. And like I've said, you're very good at what you do, so just keep it up. That's all I'm going to say.
Thank you very much, Luke. Well, it's funny you say about the score prediction because I was literally just thought, oh my God, I've forgotten to ask you score prediction. So what's your final score prediction?
I'm going to be boring. I'm going to say 0-0, to be honest.
Oh, God.
I think it'll be that, to be honest.
Not another 0-0 for 2 0-0s a week. Oh, my God.
Yeah, I can see it being that, to be honest. I don't think either side. I think both sides are good defensively, but going forward, I think at times they're a bit vulnerable. Well, they lack a bit of firepower going forward in both sides, to be honest.
If there's 2 0-0s in a week, the podcast is off. I'm just giving up. No match from me.
I won't be saying aught about it if it is a 0-0.
Well, thank you very much for coming on, Luke. As I said, all your links will be in the description below for anyone that wants to check it out. So thank you for coming on. If anyone has enjoyed, go and subscribe to Luke. Also subscribe to the channel and like the podcast, and I'll see you all on the next one.